This is the Mobile Home Park Lawyer Podcast with Ferd. If you're looking to generate wealth and passive income in the lucrative world of mobile home parks, you're in the right place. You'll discover solutions to the common legal and operational pitfalls and how to optimize parks to maximize income. Your host is in the trenches. He's a real estate attorney, financial analyst, and mobile home park investor and operator. Now, let's turn it over to Ferd.
Welcome back, Mobile Home Park Nation. Ferd here again today with another episode of the Mobile Home Park Lawyer Podcast. Got another great guest for you today. This guy's got an interesting story. He's a commercial airline pilot, but he now lives overseas. He manages and owns mobile home parks throughout the United States, mostly in the Southeast, but he'll tell you more of his story. Please help me welcome my guest, Dustin Maxwell. Dustin, thanks for coming on, man.
How you doing, Ferd?
Good. Well, tell us a little bit more about your background, how you got into this space, how you're pulling it off from overseas now, and we'll go from there.
All right. Well, started out, heck, I've always had a business sense, or something, little kid started mowing lawns. I think that's lots of common one. Then I moved on to renting or bartering out my dad's Playboys that I found. And I tried little things here and there when I was in high school and stuff. And then finally, wife and I lived in Atlanta and couldn't afford a house, so we bought a rental house. Started cash flowing like $1,000 a month. It was actually had an in-law suite on it. So started that, and it just took a few years until the light bulb went off and said, hey, wait, what am I doing? So continued on and kept on looking for houses that have in-law suites and extra units. And then I realized that we wanted to move overseas or something. So I had a reason why. I said, I need to do something bigger. I need some scale, and the single family model, small multifamilies just wasn't in the works. So continued on and looked at apartment complexes. But during this time period, there's a lot of, I don't want to call it dumb, but there's a lot of accidental money that has been made by people. And it was, I had a mentor, and it was pretty competitive. Lots of properties were being priced way too much. And I remember that my parents had a trailer up on the mountain where I grew up at, and it was a nice community. And so I started getting into that niche and moved on from there.
Great. So your story is not unlike a lot of people, where you figure out rental properties, real estate's a good idea. You want to scale, you look at multifamily is super competitive, generally then overpriced, hard to make it work. Mobile home parks, which today, just sitting here in 2022, mobile home parks are becoming ever more competitive. So I wouldn't say they're overpriced at the level of multifamily, but it's hard to find deals, right? So how do you source deals, and how do you make it work? I mean, because obviously mobile home parks are an area where it has a lot of the same benefits of multifamily apartments, but not yet as institutional, not yet as attractive, so to speak, because of some of the historical stigmas. So there's an opportunity to buy them at sensible prices and make better yield. So tell us how you're sourcing them, and I want to hear how you manage them too. Obviously now with you being overseas, it's a different animal, time zone, and other than when you were back in the South or back in the East Coast. Yeah. So let's cover some of that.
All right. Well, originally we started, just did the work online, hustling, and it's all about connections. It's reaching out and putting yourself out there and saying like, hey, I'm a new investor. It's not, you have to be proactive. You can't just say, teach me. You have to show them what you can do for them or what you can offer for them. Or, I used to, heck, when I was learning, I used to fly out to LA to meet a multifamily operator just to learn and, learn the ropes and stuff like that. Pounded down, talking with the brokers. And then finally, after you get that first deal, then people will really start taking you serious and stuff. You can go to there's lots of conferences all over the United States, and those are really good idea generators, motivations, everything. So you can get your name kind of out there and communicate with other people, and put a few minds together and the possibilities around this.
No, I think you make one good point there that I want to touch on in particular, and that's once you get your first deal. I had a client that was in the office a couple weeks ago, and in my opinion, and in her opinion as well, she was probably paying more for the deal than she wanted to, but it was a small deal. She's like, if it's a $400,000 deal, maybe you can pay 450, 480. And even if you acknowledge you're kind of quote overpaying, you get a chance to learn on a smaller deal with less risk, but also importantly, you've got one. And then when you call the brokers next time, say, hi, I'm a mobile home park owner. I saw your listing. Or, hey, I'm a mobile home park owner. What do you have that's a pocket listing? Or what do you have? Here's what I'm looking for: size, scale, geography, things like that. And they're like, oh, cool. And they'll talk to you. Versus if I've had a lot of clients that say, the brokers don't ever return my call. When I say, hey, I just finished the boot camp and I'm looking for my first deal, they're like, not wasting my time on you. So
Yeah.
With the market being as competitive it is today, if you're going for a deal through a broker, having one in the tank is really helpful. So I tell a lot of people, you might have to overpay a little for the first deal, or take a deal that has a little hair on it, or you got to just find it off market. And finding deals off market is not an easy task, right? But if you find one or two or three off market, well, now you got the lingo. I mean, I had somebody one day call and they used a term like, I'd like to buy your park. How many doors does it have? I'm like, okay, well, you clearly don't own a mobile home park, because in apartment world, we talk about like how many doors or maybe how many units. In mobile home park, we say how many pads or how many lots or how many sites. I never hear true mobile home park owners say, how many doors is it? So when this person said that, I'm like, okay, you don't own a lot of parks, which means, it may mean you're my ideal buyer because you don't know what you're doing, but it may mean you're not my ideal buyer because you can't close. You just listen to something on Bigger Pockets about apartments and you say, oh, I'll do it in mobile home parks.
You have to, sometimes you have to harness down that ambition and that excitement to not cause a disruption, with brokers, especially, they're super busy right now. So usually, unless you have spent a decent amount of time, I email them a bunch of times first. Lots of times they don't, taking phone calls and stuff is, takes a lot of their valuable time. And once they, converse with you, like you said, they see how you communicate with them, if you know the lingo and what your understanding level and stuff like that. And then they'll usually chat with you a little bit more and get you.
Agreed. One thing I give for tip for a lot of people too is just get on the broker's e-blast list. I mean, I'm on all kinds of, I get deals every day from brokers, and it doesn't take that much time just to quick delete, because most of them are in regions of the country that I'm not buying. So I'm like, okay, here's a deal in California. I'm not buying California, delete. But I've reached out to these brokers in the past and said, put me on your list, because I actually have an LOI out yesterday that I think I'm going to get back, and it's a listed deal in Iowa, and I don't even heard of this broker, but somehow I'm on their email list. I must have at one point peppered them, and I'm like, so it seemed like to me at first blush a very reasonable price, which is not that common, especially, and it's in Des Moines, which is a really good market where I already own one park. So right out of the gate, I see it, I send it to my analyst, say full price offer today, and we got out the door, and I'm hoping to get it tied up with my binding LOI, so that I have time to go look. I haven't even looked at it yet, right? I haven't driven there. It's 3 hours away, but I certainly will drive there as soon as I get it tied up. But just being on all these lists, I saw that come right out of the gate, took action, and my hope is to get it tied up with my binding LOI like today, before it goes a week or two, because my assumption is they're going to get at least 5 offers, full price or higher, which means there's going to be a call for offers, and then I'm out. Right. Then there's somebody else with more money or lower yield expectation is going to be like, I'll pay a 5 cap or a 4 cap, where it came out and it was like a 6.5 cap under market rents in Des Moines. I'm like, on market today's world, that's pretty cool. I'll jump on that, and I can get it up to a 7.5 cap, fairly quickly. So, just to kind of a tip there for people is just, as you're saying, reach out to brokers. And get on their e-blast list, and then show you're active, respond to listings and be like, hey, send me information on this, or, hey, I'm not looking in California. Do you have anything in Ohio? And then they may or may not have that for you.
Another thing too that we got hit with a lot is in the beginning, my ability to travel and stuff like that is a little bit different from other people because of one of my old day job. But you have to have a plan. You have to, if you're calling people that are hours and hours away, one of the first things brokers want to know is, okay, so why is this person calling me and they're 5 states away? You have to be able to explain it. My brother used to live in that hometown, or are you familiar with the area and stuff like that? So that helps out a lot too.
Do you tell them you're a pilot and that you could be there and be there this afternoon?
I've done it. I've met with people from quite a ways away, so that has really helped. Because they don't have time for tire kickers right now.
Right. Okay. Well, tell me how you're operating these parks. What systems you have in place, or people you have in place, and how you're, obviously, we all need people to help on our team. So how are you finding good people, and how are you interacting with them on a regular basis?
Well, I kind of got a bunch of friends and family involved in the real estate aspect of it back when I was in single family housing, and started to, do lots of reading about scaling and systems, checklists, and redundancy. Because of the pilot background, everything has to have a backup. There can't be one point of failure. So, and that I think that translates pretty well in the real estate world. If your main handy guy goes AWOL, he's gone, you have to have somebody else. You have to have, other people and stuff that can help you. So I kind of work with a bunch of friends actually in the local area, and that were doing single families and stuff too. And I said, hey, come on, join me on this. And they had friends, and so now I've got some few people around the area in different parks. I've also got some people that I use online. I use some virtual assistants. Got some over in the Philippines. I've got property managers for one park that is a mainly Latino park. They live in Mexico City. So it's all about open channels of communication and structures, and really organizing things, and standard operating procedures is if this happens, do this. If this happens, do this. If you have a question, raise it up to the manager or bring it to me.
Good. I'm particularly interested in your Hispanic park. I have a Hispanic park right now where I had a great manager, and I relocated him to a different, more challenging park, and he's doing a great job there. But I've had a real hard time keeping a good manager, the next manager, because the person has to be bilingual. And I found somebody who was okay that only spoke Spanish, but then they couldn't really talk to the rest of us. And then I have other people that wanted to have tackled the job a little bit, but they only speak English. So then they can't really relate to a lot of the residents. So they're, translating on their phone. Hey, this is what I'm, hey, your rent's due, blah, 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 blah. And it translates your rent's due, but there's no rapport there, and it doesn't work as well. So I'm curious how your coworker out of Mexico City, clearly they're not on site knocking on doors. Clearly they're not on site showing units. What scopes of work are they doing remotely? And then how are you doing the other scopes of work that can't be done remotely?
Well, this park is a few hours away from Atlanta, where my old home base was. So I have one of my partners who's out there, and he's frequently over there for the heavy lifting, currently doing an expansion and stuff out there. But more or less, it's a couple in Mexico City. And one of them handles this, one of them handles the Spanish side, and the other one handles the English side. And they work together as a team. And, they're both bilingual, obviously, too, but focus on that. And then we have an on-site manager that pretty much, he can communicate in English. I guess we can put it like that. We have some interesting conversations sometimes. My Spanish is not too excellent, but it's enough to get by. That's pretty much it. They do the managing, they do the maintenance, they do collections, they do prep leases. that's, lots of different scenarios, with some of the Spanish population, some of the troubles and stuff that they have, and, a little bit different areas for management wise too. You come across some things that you haven't seen before. We had a water bill. This was before the park was metered. Like, what the hell is going on with this water bill? It fluctuates at random times drastically. Well, once we were really digging around in the park, we found a little hidden area, and hell, they had cornfields, bean fields. They were growing everything, which is it's great, but you can't use all that water for free. You need to,
wow.
you need to pay for that.
So how did they do this without notice? It's like in their backyard, or is there like 10 acres of timber and they cut a path?
It had quite a bit of acreage that they had worked out a little community garden, in the back and stuff. So
yeah, that's kind of cool. I've thought about, we actually had one park where it was kind of a community garden, but it was up to the residents to do what they want with it, and they just kind of quit doing it. So it was there when we bought the park, and we're like, there was 2 acres of extra dirt. And we're like, I don't care if you guys, and we even tilled it for them. We even like got the,
wow.
I can't remember, they got the tiller out there and just broke up the soil for them, and then they planted. But then like a year later, apparently nobody wanted to do it. I don't know, but that kind of feels cool, like getting a community garden go. But yeah, who's paying for the water? Maybe we had the same problem because we did sub-meter that park, so maybe we killed the garden by virtue of somebody's got to pay for it. And in hindsight, maybe I would pay for that. Put an extra spigot there. But I've had the challenges where they fill up their kiddie pool every night, dump it out. Because I used to have a kiddie pool, and we didn't want to leave it sit there for 2 weeks with the same water, right? It gets stale and gets bugs in it and stuff like that. So you want to dump it out. And, I make sure to check your insurance guy, by the way. Generally for us, pools got to be the little ones below knee high, or they got to be fenced in, which nobody wants to really fence them in. But once you start charging me for water, which, is reasonable, then they don't like using their pools anymore. It's like, I can't pay for everybody's pool, 50 gallons every day.
Yeah.
Have
you explored at all splash pads in any of your parks?
I have looked into it. I do not have any splash pads. I'd say splash pads have a lot of pros over pools in the sense that their maintenance costs are way less. You definitely don't need a lifeguard compared to pool, where you probably do, or you at least have lots of signage. Insurance is going to be a lot more, and then just general liability and risk of having a pool. So what some people are doing is they're filling in their pools and putting concrete over them, and then putting in a splash pad. I've had a hard time getting someone who has them to that. I've got a couple of clients or acquaintances that have splash pads, and I'll ask them, what's it cost? What's the ongoing maintenance cost? What's the ongoing water cost?
That's the hidden question.
And they're always like, I don't know. Somebody else handles that. Let me get back to you. They got 100 parks, so they don't know that, but they never get back to me. I'll ask them again. They're like, I can't really figure that out. So I'm like, okay, it sounds like a runaway check. I've seen CapEx costs, one-time cost I've heard as low as 25,000, as high as 100,000. I thought, if it's 25 grand, that's not insignificant, but maybe you do that instead of a playground, or you put a playground with it, and it's a nice amenity that attracts residents. It's obviously going to be a relatively large park to make it worth it. But in one that I have one park that I had to fill like 50 pads, 50 mobile home pads. And I was like, man, maybe bringing this in would be a nice amenity where I can charge an extra 25 a month, and I'll sell 50 houses in half the time. I can justify it, but I never did it because I could never get, I wanted to monitor my OpEx costs. Because if it's going to cost me $1,000 a month to run this thing, well, do the math. 12,000 at a 10 cap's 120 grand. At a 5 cap's 240 grand. I don't want to lose 240 grand in my park because I got, a splash pad there. And once you give it to people, you can't take it away. Right. So I personally haven't done it. I've looked at it, but I just never got over the hump. And then that park, while I was waiting, I just ended up filling up, relatively easily. So I filled it anyway. So I'm like, well, I don't even need the splash pad. And then you got to, depending on your park, how much land area are you going to sacrifice for it? Like I have one park where I really felt like I needed a playground, and I gave up a pad for it. And, you know, that's expensive. You know, I had zero common areas. So like my mowing bill at this park is zero. Like that's how little grass I have.
Wow.
But I wanted a playground. So I had a really crappy double wide that I had to demolish anyway. And this wasn't really a good park to bring in homes because it was older housing stock, rougher park. So I just demoed the double wide, put in the playground. People loved it. So I'm like, you know what? It probably was worth sacrificing one pad for this amenity that makes the community better. But that's another part of the analysis of the splash pad.
I'll have to look that up then. Maybe a playground.
But no, if you figure, if you get a square answer on it, let me know. I'll do the same.
Yeah. I barely even found companies to do it. The main company that had wide selection and would plan out for you is out of British Columbia, actually.
Interesting. Okay. So what other tips or tricks or lessons learned or nightmares perhaps have you learned over the years that you can share with our audience?
You know, starting out, there's always that factor that you're you don't know how things are going to work. And that's the good thing about real estate. It is one of the things. It's not like studying for a test, either pass or fail. You have so much power and control just depending on how much work you put into it. You know, that old blood, sweat, and tears. Like really real estate wise, you can overcome a lot of problems and issues, even financial things, just by depending on how much you put into it, you know? So I like that aspect of it. And especially for the first timers and stuff, because when you're first in it, that's when you have that time, you know, you're learning. Get in the park. I always recommend get in the park and, you know it, learn how to do stuff. You know, spend the time researching and educating yourself on it, because it's those little nuggets, they stick with you. And then they, you know, when you have to handle a larger issue comes across.
I think there's a quote. I'll try to think of it here, but that kind of covers that I really like is something like, success comes from good judgment. Good judgment comes from experience. Experience comes from bad judgment. So, you know, I tell my team all the time, like, you know, mistakes happen, but make smart mistakes. And what I think are smart mistakes is you learn from them and you never make them again. What frustrates me is dumb mistakes, which means it's the second or third or fifth time you've made the same mistake. And then, you know, we had one issue where the rent increase didn't get properly entered into Rent Manager as a recurring charge. It was like, hey, rent's going up $20. They made it for next month. Well, then month after, it wasn't applied. So the people didn't tell us, hey, your rent's low. So then I looked at the P&L and I was like, why is our revenue down? We have full collections of this park. Why is it down? Well, it was down because it went up for 1 month and went back down. So the good employees would say, that didn't get entered properly as a recurring charge. That was a mistake. And one lady in particular, she said, I'm going to go look at the other parks to see if the manager for those parks made the same mistake. Like
those level of correlation.
That is using your brain. You know, where another employee in her region did, and we must have made a mistake on one property. Well, then like 2 weeks later, we're like, it happened on the other property. You had 5 properties and you entered them incorrectly on 2, but you didn't think to go look at all 5 to like self-audit. And then it's like, do I have to do that thinking for you? That's not good for your career trajectory. You know, you want to be the person that is, you know, I jokingly say, and I'm joking, is as an attorney, people hire us to solve problems, but really what they hire us for, they don't even know it. Is sometimes I'll say, Dustin, here's the solution. And you could be like, what do you mean solution? I'm like, to the problem that you haven't noticed yet. And that's when I'm adding value, is if I'm recognizing problems before they become problems and then proposing solutions. And that's critical thinking and, you know, foreshadowing. And it's hard to get that out of everyone, but I really think that's a key area, you know. And you mentioned in real estate, you have the opportunity to do that. You know, you can solve a problem, you can foreshadow and see a problem and solve it before it becomes a big problem. And I think you're right. That's something really cool about real estate in general. But one way to get there is exactly what you said, and that is be in the park.
Yeah.
These guys that never see their parks, I don't get it. I mean, some people are like, yeah, I look at my park. I sold a park, and we manage it for them, these guys. So I guess that helps them. But they looked at the park one time during due diligence, and then in the next 4 years, they never set foot on it again. And
Wow.
they had a competent manager, I guess, to get away with it. But I see operators that do that. They're like, yeah, I look at it once and then I hire a manager. I'm like,
if you're
do that.
comfortable doing that, if your investors are, comfortable with that, but
I do. I love calling my investors. That's a good point. I have one investor in particular I talked to him a couple weeks ago, and he's like, oh, it sounds like you're in the road. I go, I'm watching your investment. I just left. I'm 2 hours I'm driving home. And it was like 6 o'clock on a Friday night. And I'm like, I just left. I'm going to be home at 8. And he's like, nice. I was like, I'm watching your investment. They're like, cool. You actually visit. You mean you really do go? I'm like, of course I really go. And I don't go every day or every week, but I go when I think it's necessary. And then sometimes I just go strategically. If I'm going to Illinois for a family matter, I'll make stops along the way.
yeah.
What other lessons or strategies can you share?
Well, I can have being proactive instead of reactive. I think that's either a learned, like some people naturally have that, but sometimes it needs to be learned. And what I mean by proactive is taking the initiative to do things and making decisions, not with the not focusing on the fear aspect of it, because like you said, if you have something that happens, learning experience, chalk it up, move on, keep on going. So I find that lots of people who get in trouble or get stuck with things is they're more reactive, waiting for things to happen and then responding instead of really going out and taking charge of the situation and stuff and possibly making the wrong decisions. I think that's overall true. I think even with I've got a bunch of friends that just for years have been watching me grow and do all this, and they never stepped in. Hundreds of $1,000s in the bank. Now it's not worth that much, but because they could never take that little initial plunge, even with a small amount, to get moving forward, because they were too worried about what if. So
it reminds me of another quote that I think a quote I heard years ago was, you can have excuses or you can have results, but not both. And another one was like, you have to take action. I have one friend in particular. He's one of the smartest guys I've ever met, and all the guy does is learn. I mean, he every business book I've read, he's also read. Every novel my wife has read, he's also read. Every religious book either my wife or I've read, he's also read. And then 100 of them, like he's a super fast reader. I mean, he reads something like, I think he reads like a book every other day, and has for 40 years. So and he retains it. So he's just
wow.
a genius. But he never takes action. So he's like, yeah, I'm thinking about starting a podcast, I'm thinking about starting a business, or I'm thinking about doing this on the side. And I'll meet with him. And I've quit meeting with them because it's like a waste of time. It's like, you are so ready. You know more about, there's another guy. He's like, I've listened to every one of your podcast episodes twice. And I was like, why haven't you made an offer on a mobile home park? He's like, well, you haven't found the right deal. I'm like, no, you haven't found the courage to take the action or take the risk. You are smarter than the majority of operators, and you've never operated. You just need to take that leap and
be an active participant in your life. Yeah.
Sounds like the same thing with some of your friends. I mean, I remember when I read Rich Dad Poor Dad first time, Robert Kiyosaki says something along the lines of, you're gonna have new friends. And he's like, the reason is when you start making yourself better, you start taking risk, you start making more money, you start accomplishing things, some of your friends are not going to like that because they can't keep up or they won't keep up. So then they hear you saying, I'm better than you. When you're not saying that, you're saying, I'm getting better. and then they recognize that they're not, and you happen to lose some friends. And over time I've noticed that, where, you know, some of my friends, I'm like, we sit there and have, you know, enlightening discussions on the stuff you're not supposed to talk about, right? You know, money, politics, religion. And other friends are like, oh, hey, let's just talk about the Royals. I'm like, who cares about the Royals? You know, um,
Yeah,
and now you got to have leisure too. You got to have leisure
Yeah.
too, right? But I mean, I have a lot of friends that, like, all they do is leisure. That's how the only way their brain works is, you know. I'm like, don't you guys want to learn? Do you not have an opinion on the Ukraine-Russia issue? You don't have an opinion on tax policy? Are you not monitoring inflation? And, you know, they're like, I don't know if there's inflation or not, or I don't care, or I can't do anything about it. Like, okay, that doesn't mean you shouldn't think about it. You should, you know, and I think that's part of what separates successful business people is they think about the stuff. Say that again.
Getting rid of the static.
Yeah.
There's so much noise and distractions and everything going on that lots of people can't they can't realize and pull out of things, like what's important, you know, what's the you know, the value of this, or what, you know, or what's just a distraction and, you know, pointless. I don't know. I don't want to get too deep into it, but
fair enough. We'll keep it on track. Well,
but let me touch real quick. You said some things about that. Back to my proactive, reactive, and one of the things is when I was at a previous airline, I upgraded to captain, and I was going to go up to. I was based in Detroit, and up in Detroit, what lots of people don't know this, but over 50% of your pilots and flight attendants, they don't live where they're based at. They live in another city. Some of them live in other countries, and they commute in. So what they do to cut costs is kind of like a boarding house where you stay in a crash pad. And the crash pad, depending on where it is, has bunk beds. And, you know, I mean, there was one up in Jamaica, Queens that I think they shut down. And I think that was like I think they had like 50 beds in there.
In one room, like a barracks or something?
Definite fire hazard. No, it had like a building, and, you know, with a basement, and just, you know, line it up with beds and, you know, random stuff like that. So I stayed in one of those. It wasn't a pleasurable experience. And it was, you know, I thought, well, you know, there's two things going for me here. Number one, I think I could do this better. And the second thing was, you know, I think the market, there's definitely room for me in the market. So after staying in this place a couple months, 2 months later, I had 2 houses with over 30 beds. I bought cars and full of airline crew, even had a couple mechanics and stuff like that. Went great when I was over there. The only thing is it's very management intensive, you know, to keep things going. And once I was able to leave Detroit and get based in another base as a captain, I tried to do it remotely, and it was just, you know, it's something that can't really be done remotely unless you have a professional manager. So I didn't go up there for a few months, and then I came up, and wow, it was people had sectioned off parts of the living room and the basement with sheets because they didn't want to sleep with other people. And it was just, you know, the cars were trashed. The house was dirty and a mess. There was, you know, but
you were kind of running the original Airbnb, it sounds like, but by the bed, and you were providing cars, you know, community cars, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, but I mean, there's still tons of them all around, and that was a really that was a good thing and stuff. And the market really has shifted, because now if you look at all the new companies and stuff coming out, and they're always talking about kind of like, what is the house sharing, and, you know, like for startup guys, they have what do they call them, the incubator houses or whatever, where a bunch of guys will get in that, stay in the house because they can motivate each other. And so it's it's a different niche, but it was great. Learned a lot from it.
I bet that definitely is a
But
unique.
Be
experience.
proactive with it, make decisions, do stuff. Don't sit back and wait for things to happen.
Good tip. Good tip. Anything else you want to share before we jump? And if not, how can people find you, Dustin?
I do have a website. Company that I run is called Jet Setter Capital. www.jetsettercapital.com. I have a password protected on it. The password is Mario, capital M, and then ARIO. I'm currently over in Israel right now, so I will get back with you if you guys ever, try to give me a call or email me and stuff like that. You have to think I'm 7 hours time frame difference from the East Coast, and I'm constantly going back and forth to the States. But yeah, feel free to reach out and stuff. I'm always excited to chat about real estate.
All right, man. Well, thanks again, Dustin. I appreciate it.
All right, Ferd, thank you very much for your time.
Likewise.
You've been listening to the Mobile Home Park Lawyer Podcast with Ferd Neiman. Ready to learn more? Go to www.themobilehomelawyer.com for free resources and materials to help you succeed. If you love the podcast, go to Apple Podcasts, give us your review, and subscribe today. Thank you for listening. Neither the Supreme Court of Missouri nor the Missouri Bar reviews nor approves certifying organizations or specialist designations. The choice of a lawyer is an important decision and should not be based solely upon advertisements.